Good evening, folks. Good evening. So, just going to do a weekly outlook, bit of a breakdown on GJ. Going to try and keep it short and sweet, not too long, and just kind of go based on down to the 4 hour. Basically, the way the week's panning out and where price is, um, it looks like I do want to see a bit more development when we go to the 4 hour to sort of gauge direction, really, because we are sort of at daily supports. But just looking at this from a monthly standpoint, we are basically closing bearish. Now one bearish candle is a resistance, but it doesn't confirm a resistance. So, what I'm sort of paying attention to here is yes, we are bearish. We've had the weekly confirming a resistance, but we still haven't broke below or closed below, I should say. Sorry, because we have broken below but closed below monthly support here with the previous month in June, given that. We still haven't broke below June's low as well. So to me, I'm very much bullish on the pair. As well as that, when I look left, we also have this resistance, which price is respecting across here. And we also have this resistance. So it's very much like selling into this is going to be tough for me. Upside, I'm very much bullish. So it just depends on when we sort of get that change in structure back to the upside. But that's kind of all I'm kind of looking at in the monthly, just paying attention to the support. I would expect some form of, wick to be created or some sort of downside to be created on the new month. So that is expected given that we are quite bearish in terms of dailies, weeklies, and that sort of thing. So monthly, just paying close attention to these areas just above like 160, 161, and 162. Weekly, last week did put in a lower resistance, and that was confirmed. So that was something I was talking to a few guys within the community about um was this candle here confirming a lower resistance, because what I was essentially looking at was basically this range here. We have broken below, we have pulled back up, although we have formed supports, we have rejected the support, pushed all the way up, rejected the resistance, and then closed below the support. So to me, basically just looking at the weekly, it made sense to see some form of downside. Now we did have a lot of upside, but again, that's kind of even like a stronger confirmation that potentially going to go lower because we have rejected that resistance for a second time. So looking at the weekly itself, where are we? So prices like smack bang in the middle of all this wick region here. Not really nice price action, to be fair, but it does make sense based off of this to see some form of downside. However, we are at daily support, so this may well be where we get some form of upside. So not too much really to see on the weekly, only that we have confirmed the resistance, and based on that, what would you expect to see? Some form of downside. Drop the daily, and this is where it gets very interesting for me. Yeah, this is where it gets very interesting for me because basically where price is, if I just bring on this resistance zone across the board here, we can kind of see that when prices came into that, we have had reaction of support, and Friday's candle and daily candle did react from there. So when we go down to the 4 hour, we will see that we are in a bit of a range. So is there a potential for price to break out of that range, pull back and respect that, and form a higher support to continue? Now that could happen, and we could pull back into this previous level of structure on the daily, and then that could be potentially where price forms its downside, because that move up could potentially be just like the upside of the week, and then for price to just pull back to a previous level of structure to find lower resistance to continue down. Because essentially, if I look at what price has done most recently, I'm seeing that this is a support. We pushed up, created a new high with this. What I would expect would, when we come down, to form a higher support to continue, because we're forming supports, higher support, potentially a higher support. But what price has done on Friday is price is actually broken below structure and closed below support. So to me, that's an early sign of potentially change in rotation and change in structure. So as much as this could be this to do that, it could also be just a pullback to previous structure to continue. And then rather than this being this, it will then start to be this. However, it's difficult because if we are pushing down, we're going to be trading into this. And this isn't an area where I really want to be trading into. And if I just skip to the 4 hour, this is kind of where we are here on the 4 hour. So our daily support zone is basically roughly from here up to like here. So again, you're basically selling at support. You know, what I would prefer to see is I would prefer to see solid daily closures below. And then once that target's created, price could then potentially pull back. That's just an incorrect tool. Let me see. So if I'm looking at this on a daily standpoint, what I would want to see is some form of daily closures like this, right? And then as price pulls back, it may well pull back to this previous level of structure, which has been very important. And if price can form resistance at that, maybe say on the 4 hour, and then change in structure back to the downside on like 1 hours, 30 minutes, and so on, that might give me an indication to look for potential downside to target, the target that was created, which is the daily close. Because this area has been such a strong area when we have gotten above it, as we have come down. So if we can't hold here and we do close below, I would potentially expect this area to still be very strong and form a lower resistance. But in saying that, there is every chance that price can just like close back above, right? Which is a possibility because we are very much bullish in the market. And if we look at the monthly time frame, and the monthly has formed a resistance, and if we are, due to see some form of downside in the monthly candle anyway, there is a possibility price might pierce below here and then come back above. And if it does come back above and close back above on, say, like a daily, if I get like a daily candle closing back above here, then what I would be looking for is again the support resistance zone to be respected. So if we pull into that and then price starts to respect that, incorrect color, we start to respect that and close back above, then that's going to give me buying opportunities. So very much for me this week, the key is basically going to be around this zone and what actually happens on either end of it. Do we get closures below and lower resistance? Do we get closures below and then closures back above and then higher supports? Or do we just respect the structure now because we're above it and form higher supports and then continue back to the upside? But because it is the brand new month and we have had a resistance formed and confirmed in the previous 2 weeks, I'm not writing off any sort of downside, but I do expect to see that. It's kind of just how far do we come down and do we close below these on, excuse me, like the likes of dailies and things like that. So looking at the 4 hour time frame, this is where price is now. So it's in a bit of a range. And if I just go to the 1 hour, we can kind of see that that's a little bit more clear here. So again, I don't want to be trading inside this. Essentially, this is the daily support that we've seen here. So what potentially I would be looking for based on the 4 hour time frame is I'm going to be looking for this range, right? I don't really want to be trading inside this range. So at the moment, what price has done is what I'm looking at is we have formed a support with this candle. We've then formed a lower resistance with this candle, and this candle's formed, you could say, a higher support in the sense that we have done this, right? But we're still within the range, so whatever happens in here, I don't really care. It's not going to change. It's not going to say to me, well, this is most likely the direction price is going to go. What's going to interest me is what happens outside of the range. So I know if we close below the range, um, we're still, just to remember, we're still at the daily support and resistance. So even, and I'm just saying, for example, this is basically, let me just change this to white. Roughly here is like the daily resistance turns support zone. Okay, so if we close inside here, again, this is a prime area for potential buys based on what we've seen over here. When we pulled into the zone, we just pushed from the upside and respected that as support. So I'm not really going to be interested in potentially selling. Now, from a session perspective, we could potentially have closures below, which will form a target pullbacks, and then maybe lower resistances in a session, timed with potential volume, might give selling opportunities to the target. But again, what's going to basically give me more confirmation is if we have more downside, which would be like this, and then if that would maybe be a daily bearish close below, then I can look for potential trades the following day. Or because we're holding support at the zone, what I would be looking for is potential buying opportunities. Now, I'm not really focused on sales, but I do know if we get a strong daily close below, that's really my indication to like start looking for sales. Because firstly, I don't want to be selling into 4-hour support. I don't want to be selling into daily support. I don't want to be selling into any higher time frame reaction zone. And basically, where we are is right at the top of that. So the further we go down, there's still a chance for price to react and push to the upside. So just because we're closing below supports and stuff doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see downside, because this may well be the end of the downside to potentially reverse to the upside because of where we are on the higher time frame. So from an upside perspective, a good sign to me would be if we can close outside. Let me just change that to green. If we can close outside, and then I would be looking for, well, if we can hold support above the resistance, and that would signal to me the potential change in structure. So if price closes above, and if price then pulls back and respects the resistance as support, and we can target the target, or if price pulls back into the zone, the resistance could act as lower resistance to sell. But kind of like how I said earlier, I don't fancy trading inside this range. I'm not a great range trader. I don't really like to excuse me. I almost nearly died. But yeah, I'm not a great range trader. I don't really like it. Excuse me. And the better opportunities for me will come outside of the range. Apologies, I just had to take a wee minute there to clear the chest. But if we pull back into the zone, for example, and we maybe start to close back above, that might be a signal to potentially buy. So I would be looking for the resistance again, the hold of support, if it's going to have any sort of reaction, to then do that. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. But as well as that, I'm also aware that this is the daily support. So initially, that's going to be like first targets. That's going to be like the first point of contact the price is going to come into. So if I'm sort of forecasting like tomorrow, right, like what could happen coming into London session tomorrow, there's every chance that, say, we have the daily 4-hour support here, and there's every chance that when I come to my session tomorrow, price is potentially like this, right, where we push up out of the sort of range we're in, we close strong bullish, and then we close a bearish candle, like rejecting the daily support, the 4-hour support. To me, looking at where price came from, that makes a lot of sense to potentially sell, right? Because you're looking at this, and you're pulling back to your previous level of structure to do this, right? But at the same time, it's indecision. So just as much as there's potential for price to do this, there's also just as much of a possibility for price to do this. Okay, so in looking at this, if we had those sort of 4 hour candles close and come to session tomorrow, I would probably, depending on where we are and things like that, make the decision to maybe just wait. You know, like I can see myself potentially not trading maybe tomorrow or maybe not even Tuesday and just really seeing like what price does, you know, allowing price to develop more and sort of give me the indication as to confirming the direction that we're going to go, because we're at such like a delicate area on the higher time frame. So I might wait for price to, you know, say form this resistance, and then for example we might push out and hold sort of structure above this daily support, and then I might say, right, okay, what's that going to look like then on the daily? Well, that's going to look like maybe a daily support's formed. So I need to ask the question of that candle, can that support hold? So if the daily low is say down here on the following day on Tuesday, any sort of downside we have, but that's daily lows being respected and we start to come back to the upside, change in structure, might give an indication to buy. Or if we pull back to this sort of mid-range and react from here, then that's just going to give me more indication that yes, we've had this move down and now we're sort of changing back to the upside, holding supports above key daily levels. So very much one of those ones where I'm going to have to wait and see what happens. Essentially, I'm still bullish. So for me, you know, the buys make sense. There will be selling opportunities during the session stuff, but it's really just gauging, are they clear? You know, are they the best opportunities? Yes, it might be a bearish bias, but I might put myself in the best position in the market because I don't essentially have to trade every day. And if price can confirm a direction for me without me potentially guessing and going, well, it could go this way, but it also could go this way because of where we are, you know, that's probably just better to just sit out and see what happens. So looking at this on a daily time frame, if I just bring on all my zones, which is really messy, but from a weekly outlook a couple of weeks ago, I didn't want to see candles closing below this. So again, that is monthly zone. This is the daily zone. So again, candles closing below here will give me a strong indication that that could be a target. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the reaction here and the rejection, it's not really neat and nice to sell into. So very much waiting to see what happens. Probably look for buys above this area because this is a no trade range for me, but more upside potentially makes more sense for me at this point.